Greetings all, F-Man here. Welcome back to another steam engine video of this, the Wilesco D20. You've seen this one on the channel a few times. First got it in 2016, at which time I made a review of it. Handheld, low light, terrible. This won't be much better, but what we're doing today is we're going to reactivate this thing. It hasn't run for a while. As far as I can remember, the last time I ran it was November. And it is currently July, so it's been a few months, and it's just been sitting ever since. I put it away as best as I can, so drained all the water from the boiler, obviously, something you would do by default. But beyond that, I tried to clean it up reasonably. I mean, obviously, it's an engine, it's not a culinary device, so it's not like surgically clean, but clean enough to the point where hopefully we're not going to have any issues with things being bound up with old oil or sludge from contaminated water, used distilled water in it anyway, so hopefully that's okay. But we're going to go through and just inspect some things, make sure that we don't have anything that is out of place, and much less anything that's broken. And hopefully we'll be able to get this thing running with any luck. Let's see, can we see into the boiler at all? Shining a light into it. Oh yeah, there we go. What's the inside of that boiler look like? Not bad. Not bad at all, I would say. Let's see, can we... Oh yeah. Alright. A little bit of scaling in there, but again, we use distilled water exclusively in this, so I think we're just seeing the end cap of the boiler there with the way that the solder is. Maybe some deposits, mineral deposits, but for the most part, yeah. Okay. So far so good. That's pretty convincing by itself. Obviously you could take this end cap off where the sight glass is and take a much closer look that way and clean the boiler out with a little brush if you really wanted to, but that would be getting ahead of ourselves. Obviously we've got a drain cock right here for the boiler, which is open just to allow everything to ventilate. We've taken off the whistle and safety valve as well. The firebox inside, similarly, what do we have? Any debris in the firebox? Anything that we wouldn't want to go whoosh when we put fire inside here? Not that I can really tell. No. No, things look okay. That's cool. We've got the burner tray here. That looks fine. Yeah, well used, but intact. No issues with that. And the engine itself. Two-handed operation to take off the top of the oil cup there, but otherwise we have a flywheel with our crank main bearings. There is still actually some oil in that main bearing. That might be a little gummy, but we have the eccentric and its linkage and its connecting rod into the steam chest. We have the crank pin. We've got a little bit of hair on the counterweight in the crankshaft, which we'll remove. Have our crosshead linkage and its bearing. And then obviously the piston rod going into the cylinder in which resides the piston. And this is our throttle valve, which is also opened at this point, again to allow for ventilation. And then our accessories, we've got our wrench, which is used exclusively for tightening the whistle, which is right here. Our safety valve, which we will test and lubricate. And our boiler fill funnel. And then our condensate catch for the exhaust, which goes into this housing right here, where the chimney will also be fitted. So you can take a look inside here as well. Is there any gunk in there? I mean, this really doesn't matter. Just some very old deposited oil, I guess. There's the exhaust that comes from the engine into this area, dumps the residual condensate into that catch, and then the steam, which there's still plenty of at that point, comes up and exhausts through the chimney, which is right there. So, looks like we have all of our parts, and I'm not seeing anything just grossly here that's indicating that we're going to have any problems, but the inside of that boiler is actually pretty impressive. So, all right, I think we're good to proceed. Right, so we've removed the cap here from the oiler cup, and if we look inside, you will see that it appears to be clear. There are no obvious obstructions. Might be a little something in there, or it could just be some separation from residual water. Yeah, that's what I think it actually is. But initially maybe it was a piece of fuzz or felt or something, because the seals on here are just paper washers. But no, we oiled this before we put the engine away last time, and we drew it into the cylinder by rotating the crankshaft. So there shouldn't be anything in there that's superfluous, but we rotate the engine, we might get some, I can feel some tension on that. So there is something in there that's drawing a partial vacuum as we try to pull against that. Yep, there we go. So we've got flow, and we hear things. So obviously that's going to be good with residual lubricant, so no problem. Obviously we're going to add more before we fire the thing up. But yes, so far so good. I would say that we're good to proceed with filling the boiler at this point. Alright, so first thing that we need to do if we're going to be filling this thing is to close our drain valve here. When the boiler obviously has water in it, but more importantly, once there's water and pressure in the boiler, this will actually help us empty the boiler once we're done. It will blow down. Obviously when we take this thing into the sink later on. Not great practice to blow it down when it's at full pressure, because you can sort of shock the thing into a low pressure situation, and it changes the way that things expand and contract, and it can be detrimental to these toy boilers basically. But it is a boiler nonetheless, so some caution. However, next thing that we'll do once this is closed, we've got ourselves here our safety valve, which, where's the best way to, yeah, there we go. So that's the safety valve. It's a poppet valve. More or less figure how that works. How I can show this without blocking the camera too badly. There you go. It's a poppet valve. It'll blow off at about 22, 23 psi, or roughly 1.5 bar. Pressure gauge here on top of the boiler, it's got a red line at 1.5 bar, which corresponds to about 22 psi, and that's where this safety valve is calibrated to lift. It's just a spring-loaded poppet valve, completely passive and automatic, as a safety valve should be. It's effectively a dead man switch, but whatever. A little bit of steam oil on the rod there, and that'll be fine. No reason to suspect that it won't work, but we'll just give it a little bit extra help in the event that it needs any. Next thing though is to get some water in this boiler. There are 2 holes on top of the boiler. The whistle will go in one and the safety valve will go in another. Put our funnel in place, and then we will put some distilled water in this boiler. Let's see. Valve is closed. We'll start pouring. It takes a while because this funnel has a very narrow neck. But the watch glass right here, I'm looking for the water level to be a little bit more than halfway up that watch glass. Let's see. It's not quite up there yet, but it's always better to go slow with this anyway, because if you fill it too much, that's not good. Because, I mean, yes, obviously you will burn water off as you run the engine. However, if you have too much water in the boiler, what'll happen is there's no room for expansion here. And I'm not talking about expansion of water, because water's kind of weird, because when water freezes, it expands. That's why ice floats on top of liquid water. However, if you don't have enough headspace in the boiler, what can happen is, as the air on top of the water expands in there, it will then draw water and not steam behind it, and then you have water going into your engine. And it's not designed to run on water, so it just gets into hydraulic lock, and it's just all kinds of nasty, and it makes a mess. So don't overfill it. Not the end of the world if you do, but you will have to dump the boiler out and start all over again. So that's fine. We're up at about 3/4 of the way up the watch glass. You can't see this exactly, but we're about here. Parallax on the camera is not going to be helpful, I understand. About there, that's where we are, if that helps. But whatever, so I'm satisfied with my water level. I preheated the water a little bit in the microwave. This is distilled water, not rubbing alcohol in here. That would be really bad. But the next thing that we're going to do is actually, we're going to fit our chimney right there. Yep, there you go. Non-functional in terms of any performance benefit to the engine because it's simply decorative. It does channel some of the exhaust steam up and away from the boiler, but it doesn't do anything in terms of drafting the fire because it doesn't exhaust from the firebox. Firebox just exhausts directly around the boiler here. So there's no way that you can influence that via draft. You can influence it a little bit via your placement of your fire tray with these holes along the sides here. You can slide them in and out to sort of cover and uncover those holes, but you can't really influence the fire too much on these things because they're burning the S-bit tablets and they burn very consistently. They've got very consistent temperature and they have a very consistent burn rate, so they are what they are, and that's what the engine's designed to run. Regardless, we will get our safety valve in place like so. We'll get our whistle in place. Just a drop of steam oil there. Get that in there. And this is where the wrench comes in. Because if you yank on, you probably can't see it, but there is obviously a lever that actuates the whistle. If you yank on that lever, you're just going to break it. So this is where the wrench comes in. There are little notches cut into the whistle. You just turn it a little bit. About a quarter to half turn until it's snug. And then everything is fine. I'm actually going to take the safety valve off again and do the same thing I did on the base of the whistle and just put a little drop of steam oil on the threads there, just to lubricate those, because it's direct metal on metal contact, and you only got one set of threads on either component, the boiler in particular. So you don't want to screw that up if you can at all avoid it. And then the last part of that is going to be to put our condensed water catch, this drip tray, if you will, into position, which I need to be able to see. There we go. All right. So that's in place. You can't see it from your current perspective, but the oil cap on top of the engine, or just outside the steam chest on top of the steam line, is still open, and that needs to be oiled yet, and we'll do that presently. I have now changed your perspective. Isn't that meditative? Anyway, yes, this is what I'm talking about right here. This is the oiler cup I showed you with the cap on. The cap is still off right now. And what we're going to do with this is we're just going to drop in literally 1-2 drops of steam oil. And then we're going to cycle the engine. So we're going to rotate it manually there. And then I'm going to just have a constant drip feed into the engine as I continue to spin the crankshaft to draw this fresh oil into the cylinder and the steam chest, because it's been a while since this engine has run. So you really can't over lubricate a steam engine, particularly one like this where the lubrication system is a total loss system. This oil doesn't deposit anywhere. There's no oil sump or oil tank or anything like that. Once it runs through the steam chest and the cylinder, it just gets shot out the exhaust. So you can't overdo it, which is good. The only place or the only time where this may become a slight issue is on initial startup, where if you really do have too much oil and it's gummed up and clogged solid, you'll get into hydraulic lock, but it's not going to happen. Alright, so I'm going to get the engine into a reasonable start position. I'm going to fill the cap up, or fill the cup up rather. So there we go. And I'm going to replace our cap. Just snug that down hand tight. And then there are further parts on the engine that will require oiling themselves. We have our crankshaft main bearings, as I showed you before. So we've got one inboard here. We have one outboard here that you can now see. We have an eccentric sleeve And we have our main bearing on the crankshaft from the main connecting rod, the rod bearing there. So we shall put some steam oil on the main bearing right there. Our eccentric linkage and our con rod bearing there on the counterweight and the crankshaft. Our eccentric linkage to the cylinder, the slide valve there, crosshead bearing. And then that should do it in terms of lubrication that is necessary. Our throttle is right here, or our regulator, to be technical in steam engine parlance. It's just a screw valve, and it controls how much steam goes to the cylinder at any given time. Beyond that, there is nothing else that we need to do before we can light a fire under this thing. So we will get our burner tray, we will fill it up with some S-bit tablets, and then we will set it on fire and see what happens. Alright, so we have got our burner tray in its lighting position here. I've got 6 S-bit tablets inside. Our drain is closed, our whistle is installed, our safety valve is installed and lubricated, our oiler is oiled and installed in terms of the cap. All of the moving surfaces on the engine have been lubricated reasonably. Boiler has water in it. So, all of that makes sense. We will light our fuel and then slide the burner the rest of the way in. Fuel is lit. Burner is in position. Shake the top off one of the tablets there. It'll just drop that in there. Hopefully it catches. All right. So the boiler is now being fired, and at this point we are prisoners to the pressure gauge. So I can see the fire from where I'm sitting through the exhausts around the boiler here. We preheated the water that we put in the boiler, so hopefully it won't take as long as it could take to heat up. But I'm going now to close our regulator valve. This is our throttle. And that's closed. So at this point the boiler is more or less sealed. There is of course always some leakage because this valve isn't 100% perfect, nor is the whistle, nor is the safety valve, nor is the tap for the pressure gauge, but whatever. Pressure is now building inside the boiler as the water begins to heat up. And actually we're off the pin already. Helps when you preheat that water a little bit. It was probably around 150 F when I poured it in. Uninsulated, of course, everything is, so it was losing temperature pretty much at a constant rate, I would say. But I'm indicating about 5 psi on the gauge at the moment, which is well more than enough to kick the engine over. But of course, we don't have any boiling water as of yet. So if I open the regulator now, the engine would probably start to kick over and then it would stall out because we don't have any steam pressure behind it. Alright, just above half a bar indicated. Again, we're not quite going to believe that pressure gauge at the moment because of what the state of the water temperature must be. We're indicating about 12 psi, or about 0.8 bar. So, very brief overview of the mechanics of the engine. It is a double action or double acting steam engine. We have got a single piston, obviously, so a single cylinder, but we have a slide valve here operated off of an eccentric linkage from the crankshaft, meaning that we have a power stroke to bottom dead center as well as a power stroke to top dead center. So that means that this engine can run in both directions. It doesn't care which direction it runs for the most part because it doesn't matter. The intake is an exhaust, is an intake, depending on where that slide valve is. So it's 100% reversible. It's also theoretically self-starting, provided that you try to start it from a reasonable position, like about here. So it has 2 power strokes per revolution of the crankshaft, which means that it's generating power more or less constantly. You would effectively have a 2-cylinder 4-stroke engine to have the equivalent power cycles on this steam engine. To put that into context for you. So showing about 18 psi now indicated. This is hot air, of course, above the hot water in the boiler, but if we crack the regulator, see that the engine wants to start. And with a little bit of persuasion from my left hand, it's, yep, ticking itself over. Now steam's starting to come in, so it may play with hydraulic lock a little. Give it a little bit more persuasion. Now you can hear the water starting to boil because we've relieved the head pressure. Pressure has dropped in the boiler from about 18 psi to around 12, but we're now starting to boil. And there we go. Right, so the engine's running quite eagerly. Safety valve is already thinking about lifting. There's 1.5 bar on the pressure gauge. There's 1.6 and a half roughly. You can hear that hissing, that is the safety valve as it's lifting. So it's helping us out quite a lot here. But the engine running clockwise as it is, you can very clearly hear those exhaust beats, as it were. You can also hear a gurgling sound. That is the condensed water running through the exhaust into the condensed water catch underneath where the chimney is fitted, which you can't quite see. Let's see the old hand next to the boiler trick. Yep. Safety valve has lifted and it is venting boiler pressure as it should, so that's perfect. Boiler pressure is holding about 1.6 and a half bar indicated, so that is pretty much bang on where the safety valve should be lifting. And it's called the safety valve for a reason, because if we didn't have that pressure relief, we would be going off scale high on the pressure gauge in short order. The pressure gauge cuts off at 2.5 bar. I believe the burst pressure on this boiler is 4 bar, so yeah, you wouldn't want that. Even though we only have a maximum boiler capacity of about 500 milliliters, if that thing went off at 4.5 times atmosphere, you wouldn't want to be anywhere close to it. So, glad that we have that pressure relief situation going on. We stop the engine by shutting down the regulator. Boiler pressure starts to rise again. The safety valve lifts some more. We're about 25 psi indicated, so 1.7 bar, but the safety valve is already lifted, so the pressure is not rising above that. Beautiful. We want to run the engine in the opposite direction. We'll sort of prime it to start in the opposite direction. We'll open the regulator again slightly. Give it a help. There we go. Engine's now running counterclockwise. And it's a little bit quieter running counterclockwise as well. Probably some quirk in the valve timing, but either way, the engine doesn't really care in which direction it's running. I can see in the watch glass here, you can't see this, but I can see vigorous boiling going on in the watch glass, because even though the boiler is at 1.7 bar right now with the safety valve lifted constantly, the water is under pressure above ambient atmosphere, and the gauge starts measuring obviously with that bias of ambient atmosphere. So actually the pressure in the boiler is about 2.7 bar, taking into account standard atmosphere here, but I can still see visible boiling going on there. But engine operation is smooth, no problems with that. I could obviously open up this regulator a whole lot more if I wanted and really rev this thing out, but it's not really the point of these things. And it's definitely a whole lot quieter running counterclockwise than it is clockwise. Like if I stop it again, and then if we want to reverse direction, you'll see what I mean. Now running clockwise once more. A little bit louder. Not entirely sure why. Again, I think it's a quirk in the valve timing, but it's there. We can increase speed slightly. Incremental adjustments on the regulator, because nothing is quite instantaneous on a steam engine, even throttle adjustments. You sort of got to bump it in one direction or another and see what happens over the next few seconds. See what I mean? I made small adjustments and the speed increased an awful lot, and then you kind of dial back on the adjustments. That's why if you see cab ride videos from steam locomotives, you'll often see the engineer or the fireman, whoever is operating the throttle at that moment, they're very abrupt and jerky with it. That's because things take a moment to react. But there you can hear that knocking. So if we shut down and get ready to run in an opposite direction at more or less the same speed. Much quieter. Again, must be valve timing. Fire's still looking good, I can tell from afar. Water level is about halfway up the watch glass. So I have no constraints, no concerns. My only concern though is the condensed water catch, which if I stop the engine here, I'm going to empty this right now, because it's not quite full, but it's close enough. Alright, that's back in position. Restart. There we are. Running a little faster than before, but still counterclockwise. appears to be the preferred direction for this engine. But beautiful nonetheless. And I must say, for a single-cylinder engine, it is very smooth. Some of the slightly smaller cylinders, such as on the D455, which I've shown on the channel, as well as the various Jensens that I've shown on the channel, they tend to vibrate a lot more than this, but this is actually quite a large cylinder for a model steam engine. And even though there's just one of them, it's very even. There is very little observable vibration, which just makes me think about the D32 from Wilesco, which is a very limited production double-cylinder version of this, effectively. It's basically a D20 with 2 cylinders. That must be quite the thing to see running, because this is very smooth as it is. I also think that the D21 has the same cylinder. So the D21, as far as I can tell, is the same boiler, same cylinder, same flywheel. But the only difference with that one is that it has a manual feed water pump that you can inject water into the boiler as you're running. Cool feature. I don't really see the application for my purposes, but I think that one has the same general arrangement as the D20. And then you go up to the D32, where you have the same arrangement but duplicated in terms of the engine side. So 2 flywheels, 2 cylinders, and all that, plus a feed water pump run off the engine, which must be interesting as well. But yeah, that thing must really be impressive, because this is impressive as it is. And again, I've had this engine since 2016. I'm not sure of its actual date of manufacture. It's a newer one, obviously, because the original D20s just had the engine exhausting out the side of the steam chest right here into a little condensed water tray, and this one exhausts into the chimney. But beyond that, very similar to the D20s that you'll find from any era from Wilesco. Fire is calming down a little bit, but still going pretty strongly. Still indicating about 1.4 bar on the pressure gauge. Getting this thing running again really couldn't have gone any more smoothly. No problems whatsoever. Again, I try to take care of these when I do put them away. I make sure that everything is drained in terms of the boiler side, and I do over lubricate the engine. As far as I'm concerned, I run steam oil through the oiler, cycling it manually into the steam chest and cylinder as much as I can to just try to displace whatever residual water might be in there. And hopefully that staves off any corrosion, and apparently it works. So I guess I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because this thing's running like a clock. Starting to slow down a little bit because the fire is dying off a little bit. Pressure in the boiler is coming down. Now indicating about 1.2 bar. You will see a cat crossing the frame in a moment. Or maybe not. Yeah, just barely missed it. Well, there goes another 500,000 views, I suppose. There's the other cat. Just barely there in the upper left. Safety valve, if you didn't hear, has now reseated because we are now well below its blow-off pressure of 1.5 bar, about 1.1 at the moment, continuing to drop. Again, the fire is calming down a lot, and I've not reduced my throttle opening, so we're now using more steam than we're generating. And that's what you want. You want the fuel to burn out before the water runs out of the boiler, so that's where we are. Water level is about 1/4 of the way up the watch glass now, so about there. Or there, whatever is easier for you to see. Neither one is great, I am aware. However, I'm also getting a thermal warning on my camera, which is really annoying because you should know that people want to take extended clips with their cameras, so why do you make them do this? But whatever, it's a Sony product, ladies and gentlemen. So what I'm going to do, pressure is now about 0.95 bar. I'm going to stop the engine. Now I'm going to cut the camera off here because it's going to conflagrate, apparently. Right, so post-run, everything looked okay. We have refilled the boiler to the extent that we have needed to, so we're about 3/4 of the way full on the watch glass once again. We've re-oiled the engine in terms of all of its articulated sections as well as the oiler cup, and we have refilled our burner tray with 3 SPIT tablets now rather than the initial 6 that we started with because we've got some heat in the boiler. So we will relight and then run this once more. There we go, we are lit. Slide that in. Yeah, and then we will wait for pressure to start rebuilding. Shouldn't take too long. I can see that our center and aftmost, at least in terms of closest to the camera on this side, fuel tablets have caught. The forward one will take a little bit longer. That's fine. And I believe that they've all caught now. So again, as we had before, I'm expecting to have some pressure rising in the boiler as a result of the hot air above the water. And that might be enough actually to start the engine. You hear some crackling here because I spilled a little bit of water as I was refilling the boiler. That's just some of that water on the outside boiling off. However, we are off the pin now on our pressure gauge. And all 3 fuel tablets have now lit. I think these fuel tablets under perfect conditions actually reach about 1200 Fahrenheit. So we've got some very consistent heat here. Makes sense that we can raise pressure as quickly as we are. We're currently showing about 4 psi. Now 5. Yeah, it happens pretty quick. Now 6, yeah, it happens very quickly. So when we get to half a bar, I will open the regulator and see if we can get the engine to kick over. 6.5 psi, there's about 7, and there's half a bar. We're going to crack the regulator now. See some movement on the flywheel. Open it a little more. Pressure in the boiler is dropping precipitously, now down to 2 psi, 1 psi. Open the regulator all the way. Got hissing going on from the boiler showing that we are boiling water. Boiler pressure still off the pin, but indicating just about 1 psi. I want the engine to run counterclockwise, so we'll get it suggested in that position. Water's boiling, I can see that in the watch glass. Pressure is about 1.5 to 2 psi. We have steam going to the engine. There we go. It's running. It is running now, showing 5 psi. It's amazing. .5 bar, about 6 psi, 7 psi. Cool. Not touching the throttle, obviously. Pressure is still rising in the boiler. Now showing about 11 psi. Continuing to rise. There's 12, 13, 14. There's 1 bar, 15 psi. 16. 17. 1.75 bar, 18 psi. 19 psi. 20 psi. Cool. There's 1.4 bar coming up to the red line on the pressure gauge. Expect the safety valve to lift anytime now. There's 1.5 bar. I hear some whistling now as the safety valve starting to lift. 1.6 bar, 23 psi, 24 psi. Safety valve is lifting, I can feel it. 24.5 psi. I can feel the safety valve now on my face, a good foot away from this thing. 25 psi. Safety valve has lifted. 25 psi and holding. That's beautiful. And this is actually a very light throttle opening. I haven't touched it since we started the engine. That's just what it does at 24.5 psi. Obviously, if we were running under load, I'd have to crack the throttle quite a bit more, and we'd have to have a bit more of a robust fire to keep the steam up. But for what we're doing here, just ticking itself over, overcoming the inertia of its own flywheel, no problem. Running beautifully. And again, I've had this for about 9 years, and I haven't done anything to it apart from keep it reasonably clean and just put it away in a state where it's not going to corrode. Showing about 23 psi. Safety valve is still lifted. I still feel that safety valve venting. I'm about 1.5 feet away from it, but I can feel it on my face. It actually feels quite nice from this distance. Wouldn't want to get much closer though, because I would be burned, but it feels nice, actually. Water level still looks great. Pressure's dropped below 1.4 bar. Fire is calming down. Pull it out slightly. I'm going to get ready to take a look at our condensed water catch, so we'll stop the engine. Condensed water is not quite full, but almost. We'll dump this. That's dumped, we'll put it back in position. Start the engine again. There we go. Somewhat slower this time, but it doesn't matter. Still about 1.4 bar, more or less. About 1.3.5. Ultimately, what you would want to do if you were going to run an engine like this for an actual utilitarian purpose, like if you wanted to charge a phone or something with this, it would certainly be capable of it, but you would want to have what they call a chuff pot in the model steam hobby. You'd want to have something that would actually have some proper capacity for that condensate, so you don't have to stop the engine every few minutes and dump the catch. And ideally, you would also want some sort of oil-water separator so that you could recapture that condensed water and then use it again in the boiler, which would have no problem. It's effectively distilled water still, because it's been evaporated, it's been converted to steam, and then it's recondensed on its way out. So if you could get the water and the oil separated, because of course there's going to be oil in that exhaust as well, because we lubricate the engine, then you could reuse that water. And that's something that power plants use. It's something that steam-powered marine plants use on ships. So like, you could do that, but I don't have the resources to make something like that happen as far as I'm concerned. In terms of oil-water separators, I think on ships at least, that would have been something that was also using bleed pressure from the boilers themselves to basically to atomize the water so that it would then fly into some sort of a venturi setup, to where the water would separate from the oil, and then the oil being lighter would then go somewhere else, and you capture the heavier water, and then it's basically pure feed water again. But it's all just dumping into a single catch can as far as we're concerned here, so not really feasible to do that. And it doesn't matter anyway, because it's not like distilled water breaks the bank. But you could do something like that. I've seen some people on YouTube have some pretty interesting setups with their model steam plants, and they seem like they'd be pretty well self-sustainable. Obviously, there's always loss in any kind of system, but it seems like they'd be able to recapture the majority of their feed water. So that would be something interesting to consider, but for my purposes, this is pretty good as a more or less total loss system. Sometimes when I do drain the boiler, I'll dump that back into my distilled water reservoir, but for the most part, no, it's all waste. Pressure's down to just under 1 bar, or about 14 psi. Fire in the burner tray is not out, but it's died down significantly. Crack the throttle a little more. Keep our revs up to where they are, more or less. Pressure is dropping pretty consistently now. Pressure continues to drop. We're obviously using steam much more quickly than we're generating it. About 10 psi, about 0.7 bar. And the engine is slowing down just as a factor of that boiler pressure dropping. Fire's just on the cusp of going out. I'm going to stop the engine. All right. I'm going to crack the oiler cup here. That's something that you want to do anyway, because the tolerances on this are pretty fine, meaning that if you have this sealed when the engine is running, meaning it's all hot, when it cools again, the threads in here are going to lock down really tight to the point where it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to take that off. So crack this when it's hot, so you'll be able to get that off reasonably well. Otherwise, our fire has now gone out. We'll take our burner tray out because this can also seize in position if you let it cool inside the firebox. So that's fine, we'll just leave that there, whatever. And the boiler will now just cool down naturally. We're about 6 psi indicated now. I'm not going to sound the whistle, even though there's enough pressure to do that. I don't want to blow your ears out if you're wearing headphones. So 5 psi, and then the pressure is just going to drop naturally. But everything seems okay. I'll take the oiler cap off. It's very hot, but my hands are more or less used to this now. It still hurts a bit, but it's not too bad. So oiler cap is off, and we'll just let everything cool down a little bit here. Pressure is dropping to about 4 psi, and then I'll continue down to ambient. At which point, once I see 0 on the gauge, we'll take the safety valve off right there, and then we will open the boiler up. Right, so we've got more fuel in the burner tray, we've got more water in the boiler, engine is oiled again. Run it one more time. And we're running. Push that in. And again, it should not take long. We are already off the pin on our pressure gauge. Showing about 1 psi indicated. It's going to continue to rise pretty quickly. There's about 4 psi. There's 5. And again, once we get to half a bar or about 7.5 psi, we'll open the regulator. There's 6. 7. There's half a bar. Crack the regulator. More than crack it, we'll open it all the way. Open it all the way to the stop. There it is. There's 8 psi. And get the engine to help to go counterclockwise. There we go. Pressure dropping to about 1 psi. And here the water starting to boil. This is just hot air cycling the engine at this point. It'll probably stop again. There we go. But pressure is now rising once again. There is 1.5. There's 2, 3. Give the engine help some more. Down to about 1 psi again. And it's stopped, but we'll try to keep it rotating as best we can. Now steam is starting to come in, so it's getting into that hydraulic lock as the engine starts to warm up once more. There we go. Close that regulator down. There we are. Very cool. Half a bar, about 7 psi. There's 10 psi. One bar, about 15 psi. There's 16. Safety valve will lift soon. 17. There's 18. 19. 20. It's 1.4 bar, 21 psi. 1.5 bar, 22. Safety valve is lifting. There's 23. 24. 25. 25.5, and we're stabilizing here. And safety valve has lifted. About 25.5. That's cool. Still holding about 25. Fire looks good. Stop the engine here. Empty the condensed water, safety valve working overtime. We'll restart. Cool stuff. Fire's coming down a bit. Pull it rearward a little bit. Uncover some of the other holes along the way. Safety valve is reseating. You're now at about 1.3.5 bar. Very nice. I very much like to run the engine at about this speed because it's virtually silent apart from the gurgling and the exhaust. It's really cool. There it is. Very cool. Wilesco D20 returned to operating condition. Didn't miss a beat. Again, if you store them correctly, if you make sure that you put everything away correctly, cracking this oiler cup while we still can, they will be there whenever you want to run them again. Very cool to see. Really very simple technology, all things considered. It's water and it's fire. Heat, steam, pressure makes things turn. It's really cool, very intuitive, and definitely a really cool sort of object to have if you just want to amuse yourself while you're suffering from insomnia. So yeah, that's what I've got for you here today. F-Man saying thank you very much for watching. And of course, we will see you soon.